They thought she was weak. In the crowded hallway of Westview High, 3 bullies decided to humiliate a quiet black girl, laughing, shoving, recording her pain like entertainment. What they didn't know? Their easy target was a karate black belt trained to stay calm until someone crossed the line. And when they did, the hallway learned a brutal truth. The quiet ones hit hardest. What happened next flipped the entire school upside down, and none of them walked away the same. The hallway of Westview High exploded with noise the moment the bell rang, lockers slamming shut, sneakers scraping across polished floors, conversations colliding into one messy wave of teenage chaos. Bodies pressed against each other as students rushed to their next class. But the moment Amina Harris stepped through the double doors, something subtle shifted. Not silence, just a brief stutter in the atmosphere, like the school itself inhaled sharply. Amina walked quietly, clutching her books close to her chest, her posture small but steady. She had only been here for 3 days, and every one of those days felt like navigating a new battlefield with rules she hadn't learned yet. She kept her head down, moved with intention, and avoided eye contact, hoping the crowd would swallow her whole and let her pass unnoticed. But Westview High was not that kind of place. From the far end of the hallway, Derek Nolan, captain of the basketball team and self-appointed ruler of this corridor, spotted her immediately. Leaning against his locker with the smug confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life, he nudged the boy beside him. "Look at that," Derek murmured to Kyle, who was already pulling out his phone like he sensed something worth filming. "New girl looks like she's gonna be fun." Kyle grinned, swiping open the camera. "Yeah, soft target." Mason Reed, the 3rd member of their trio, cracked his knuckles and started moving. The crowd parted for him, not out of respect, but out of fear. Everyone knew trouble followed wherever Mason wandered. Amina didn't notice him until it was too late. Mason slammed his shoulder into hers, hard enough to send her stumbling, her books exploding across the hallway floor like broken wings. Pages fluttered everywhere. Laughter erupted instantly, loud and sharp. Kyle zoomed in gleefully, capturing every second as if humiliation was a sport and Amina was the warm-up act. Amina froze for one breath, then another. She didn't yell, didn't glare, didn't demand an apology the way most kids would. She simply knelt down and began picking up her books, one by one, in perfect silence. And that silence, quiet, poised, unshaken, made Derek uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. "Seriously?" he scoffed. "That's it? She's not even mad?" Kyle snickered. "Maybe she's too scared." But as Amina reached for the last notebook, something shifted. She straightened slowly, her fingers tightening around the book's spine. Then she lifted her face, just slightly, just enough for her eyes to meet Derek's across the hallway. And Derek froze. Her eyes weren't afraid, weren't pleading, weren't even embarrassed. They were cold, steady, controlled, and disturbingly calm, like she had seen 1,000 versions of this moment and survived them all. For a fraction of a second, Derek felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine, a flicker of hesitation. It wasn't fear, not yet, but it unsettled him enough that his smirk faltered. But Derek Nolan was not someone who ever allowed himself to look weak. Not in front of Kyle, not in front of Mason, and definitely not in front of the hallway he ruled, so he forced a smirk back onto his face, masking the unease with cruelty. "Don't let that quiet act fool you," Derek muttered to Kyle, loud enough for half the hallway to hear. "She looks weak, but I want to see how long she lasts." Kyle chuckled, raising his phone higher for a better shot. Students nearby exchanged glances, sensing a storm forming in slow motion. Amina turned away, holding her books close again, and began walking, steady, silent, unchanged. But Derek watched her like a predator, marking its prey. "Yeah," he said under his breath, eyes narrowing with interest. "Let's see how long until she breaks." Little did Derek know, the moment he laid hands on Amina Harris, he set off a chain of chaos that would consume the entire school. The hallway was thinning, the once chaotic stream of students trickling down to only a few lingering clusters as the next period neared. The blue lockers stretched endlessly along both sides, reflecting the fluorescent lights in harsh, cold streaks. It was the kind of moment when most troublemakers disappeared into classrooms to avoid teachers, but not Derek Nolan. He stepped forward at the exact moment Amina approached, blocking her path with the casual arrogance of someone who believed the hallway belonged to him. His hand shot out, pressing against her shoulder, shoving her back until she collided with the row of lockers. The metallic clang echoed far louder than it should have in a half-empty hall. A few students stopped. A few walked faster. A few pulled out their phones. Kyle was already prepared. The camera flashed to life as he opened the private group, Westview Exposed, a digital arena where humiliation was entertainment and cruelty was currency. "We're live," Kyle muttered, angling the phone so the 100-plus watchers could get a full view of Amina trapped between Derek and the lockers. "Round 2. Mason drifted in next, cracking a grin that split across his face like a scar. He leaned in close to Amina and mimicked her voice in an exaggerated, mockingly high pitch. "Aw, poor little new girl. Can't even walk straight without dropping all her junk." Several students laughed. Others looked away. Most simply watched with that familiar mixture of fear and fascination, wanting to see how far Derek would go this time. Amina didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She didn't give them the reaction they were starving for. Instead, she inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and lifted her eyes to meet Derek's, silent, steady, unmoved. Derek leaned his weight closer, his face inches from hers. "Say something," he demanded, tapping the locker behind her with his knuckles. Bang, bang, bang. "Come on, don't go quiet on me now." Amina's only response was a soft sigh, a tired, restrained breath that sounded more like disappointment than fear. And somehow that infuriated Derek even more. Behind him, Kyle's phone vibrated non-stop. The live-stream chat was exploding. "Push her again. Bro, she's not even fighting back. Go harder. Make her kneel Lowell. Do something wild for the camera." The comments rolled in like a cheering crowd in a gladiator pit, demanding blood, demanding humiliation, demanding a show. Kyle smirked. "Derek, they want you to turn it up." The encouragement hit Derek like gasoline poured over an open flame. His jaw flexed with excitement. He lived for attention, for validation, for dominance, and this audience was begging him to give them more. He lifted his hand and poked Amina's forehead. Hard. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." She did, slowly, calmly. No expression on her face except a quiet stillness that made Derek feel mocked without a single word spoken. That made something snap inside him. "Nah," Derek growled, grabbing her collar. "If you're gonna act tough, then show me. Come on, show everyone watching how strong you really are." Mason laughed loudly behind him. "Yeah, prove it, princess." Amina didn't lift her hands to defend herself, didn't pull away, didn't speak, and that silence, again, was gasoline on Derek's growing rage. He slammed her back into the lockers once more. Metal shook. Someone gasped. Kyle zoomed in. "Come on," Derek hissed, tightening his grip. "Show us how tough you are." Amina's jaw tightened. Just slightly. But she still didn't respond. Derek had no idea that the very next move he made would cross a line from which there was no return, one that would unleash the part of Amina he should have never, ever provoked. The corner of the hallway was quieter than the rest. An isolated stretch where the fluorescent lights flickered weakly, casting pale shadows against the blue lockers. A security camera blinked lazily from above, recording everything yet watched by no one. It was the kind of forgotten corner where trouble could bloom unnoticed, and Derek Nolan knew it well. He shoved Amina deeper into the dim corridor, out of sight from teachers, but perfectly framed for Kyle's camera. Kyle followed eagerly, adjusting his angle like a filmmaker preparing for the climax of a scene. "Move her a little to the left," Kyle said. "Yeah, that's good. Perfect lighting," Derek grinned. Amina said nothing. He grabbed her collar with a sudden jerk, yanking her forward so aggressively that her hair whipped across her face. The force pulled her school bow loose, the neat blue ribbon that had been tied at her neckline all morning. The bow fluttered to the ground, soft, silent, almost gentle in contrast to the violence that tore it off. But somehow that small, soundless fall carried a weight no one around her understood. Kyle zoomed in on it immediately. "Oh, that's beautiful," he breathed, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Perfect. This video is going to go viral, I swear." Mason burst into laughter, the cruel kind that echoed down the hall like something sharp and hollow. "Look at her. She can't even keep her little bow on." Several students who had been lingering nearby drifted closer, drawn by the spectacle the same way people slow down at the scene of an accident. Their whispers filled the air. Curiosity, pity, anticipation, all mixed into one tense hum. Amina didn't look at them. She didn't look at Derek. She didn't look at Kyle. She looked at the bow. Slowly, she bent down to pick it up. Her fingers touched the fabric delicately, almost reverently, as though she were handling something sacred. But her breath was different, shallow at first, then deeper, controlled, measured, not fear, not sadness, something else, something carefully held back, a storm sealed behind glass. When she rose again, she wasn't trembling, she wasn't crying. Her face remained calm, too calm, but her hand tightened around the bow until her knuckles paled. In that tiny gesture, something shifted in the air. Amina wasn't simply picking up a fallen accessory. She was restraining something, some instinctive, trained response that flickered in her muscles before she forced it still. A familiar tension, a familiar discipline, a familiar urge to strike before being struck. Amina swallowed it down, but just barely. It pressed at the edges of her control like a tide begging to break free. No one around her recognized the warning signs, but Amina felt every inch of it. Derek didn't notice. He was too intoxicated by the attention, too eager to carve his dominance deeper. He stepped closer, towering over her, his grin sharp and triumphant. "What's wrong?" he mocked. "Cat got your tongue." Kyle moved in behind him, reading comments pouring into the live stream. "Dude, they love this. They're saying go harder. Don't stop now." At that encouragement, Derek puffed himself up, basking in the spotlight the way predators bask in applause. He didn't see the silent calculation behind Amina's eyes. He didn't see the way her breathing evened out with precision. He didn't see the way her stance shifted by a centimeter. Subtle, practiced, dangerous. The crowd around them grew larger. Students formed a loose circle, murmuring among themselves, waiting, watching, hungry for a climax they couldn't name, but felt drawing near. Their footsteps scraped the floor like restless spectators in an arena. The air pressed in tighter. The tension throbbed. Amina stood in the center of a growing ring of students, bow gripped in her hand, as if every pair of eyes around her were waiting for the moment she finally broke. Kyle, feeding off the crowd's rising energy, nudged Derek eagerly. "Come on, man. Don't stop now. They're watching. Keep going." And with those words, Derek stepped over a line he never should have crossed. The hallway bent sharply near the restrooms, creating a narrow pocket of space hidden from most of the school's traffic. The sounds of distant chatter faded here, replaced by a hollow quiet that invited trouble. No teachers ever lingered near this corner. Everyone knew it, and Derek Nolan counted on it. Amina had barely taken 3 steps toward her next class when Derek cut her off again, this time with no audience needed. His hand shot out, grabbing a fistful of her hair and yanking her backward with a force that jolted her entire spine. Her breath caught, her balance faltered. Her knees bent instinctively just to stay upright. Pain burned across her scalp, sharp and ripping, but Amina said nothing. She simply steadied herself and lifted her head. Kyle whirled around instantly. camera ready, recording every second as if violence were a collectible moment he didn't want to miss. Mason hovered nearby, smirking, arms crossed, waiting for the next spectacle. But someone else saw Ruby Tran, a quiet sophomore known for keeping to herself, had just stepped out of the girls' restroom. Her eyes widened instantly at the scene unfolding before her. "Hey, stop! Leave her alone!" Ruby cried, stepping forward. Kyle moved faster. He shoved Ruby to the side with a single arm, knocking her into the wall. "Back off!" he snapped. "Unless you want to be in the video, too." Ruby froze, clutching her shoulder, fear and outrage battling in her expression. But she stayed. She couldn't walk away. Not when she could see the strain trembling through Amina's hands. Amina's fingers twitched dangerously, gripping the bow still in her palm. Her breath shook once, just once, but she forced it steady, grounding herself against the locker behind her. Derek leaned in, twisting her hair tighter. "What was that look earlier, huh?" he hissed. "You think you're better than us? You think you can stare me down?" Amina didn't answer. Her jaw clenched. Her nostrils flared with the effort of containing something deep and instinctive. Kyle zoomed in. "Oh, she's shaking," he said gleefully. "This is gold." But the tremor in Amina's hand wasn't fear, it was restraint. Amina's eyes slid closed for exactly 2 seconds, not in surrender, not in terror, in discipline. A breath in, a breath out. A grounding technique, one drilled into her bones through years of martial arts training. A centering ritual designed to keep a fighter from striking before they absolutely had to. Ruby recognized it. She didn't know how, but she felt it. Derek, however, saw only weakness. "Oh, you're scared now?" he sneered, releasing her hair, only to shove her back against the restroom door. "Good. You should be." Amina's eyes opened again, steady, eerily calm, the storm behind them pressed down like a lid about to crack. Derek grabbed her chin, forcing her face upward. "Here's what's gonna happen," he said, voice thick with arrogance. "You're gonna kneel, you're gonna apologize, and maybe, I'll let you walk away." Kyle lifted the phone higher. "Say it louder, man. The comments want more." Derek smirked, enjoying his role far too much. "Now," he drawled, tightening his grip on her jaw, "get on your knees and apologize." A hush fell over the small corner of the hallway, Ruby holding her breath, Mason pretending not to care, Kyle waiting for the perfect shot, Derek feeding on the power he thought he had. Amina didn't move, not an inch. Her breathing changed again, quiet, controlled, warningly precise. And then Derek, desperate to break the unbreakable, made the one mistake that shattered every ounce of restraint Amina had fought to maintain. The hallway had emptied almost entirely now. The distant sounds of classrooms settling into their lessons were muffled behind heavy doors, leaving only the sharp echo of shoes against tile and the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. It felt like the entire school was holding its breath. Amina stood near the restroom entrance, still surrounded by Derek, Kyle, Mason, and Ruby, though Ruby hovered helplessly at the edge, unsure if she should intervene again. The tension clung to the air like static, thick and vibrating. Derek's smirk spread slowly across his face, mean and triumphant, as he reached forward with a calculated casualness. He didn't hit her. He didn't shove her. Instead, he snatched the phone from Amina's hand. Her fingers tightened too late. Her breath halted mid-air. Derek weighed the phone in his palm, as if deciding how to best destroy it. His grin sharpened, fueled by the live-stream audience Kyle was still entertaining. "You know what your problem is?" Derek said, stepping back just far enough to theatrically wind up. "You walk around here like you're better than us, like you're untouchable." Amina didn't move, didn't blink. "Lesson 1, Derek announced. He slammed her phone onto the floor. The sound, shattering glass and cracking plastic, rang out like a shot through the nearly empty hallway. The screen splintered instantly, spiderwebbing across the surface, pieces scattering at Amina's feet. But Derek wasn't finished. He lifted his shoe. And with slow, deliberate pressure, he crushed it. The crunch was final. The hallway went dead silent. "There," Derek said, breathing hard with satisfaction. "That's your first lesson. Maybe now you'll learn your place." Kyle let out a sharp laugh. "Dude, the live stream is going insane." But Ruby wasn't looking at Derek. She wasn't looking at Kyle. She was staring at Amina, at her hands, at the subtle tremor running through her fingers, at the way her shoulders squared, not in fear this time, but in something far more dangerous. Amina stared at the broken phone like it was a threshold she had been desperately trying not to cross. The last barrier, the last anchor, and Derek had just smashed it. She inhaled slowly, her chest rising in a controlled arc. When she exhaled, it was quieter than a whisper, but carried the weight of something old, trained, disciplined. Ruby, trembling, stepped forward and blurted out the words before she could stop herself. "Amina, she's not normal. Derek, stop. Please, you don't understand." Derek barked a laugh. "Not normal? What, is she magic or something?" Kyle snorted behind him. "What's she gonna do? Cry harder?" Ruby shook her head violently. "No, no, you idiots, she's—" But the rest of her warning died in her throat the moment Amina moved. It wasn't an attack. Not yet. It was something far quieter, far colder. Amina bent down and picked up her bow again, the same bow Derek had knocked off earlier. But this time, she didn't cradle it gently. She gripped it with purpose, with resolve. Then, in one fluid motion, she tied it back into place at her neckline. The ribbon settled neatly, perfectly symmetrical, as if she were preparing herself for something ritualistic, something controlled. Slowly, she rose to her full height. Her posture straightened, her breathing leveled, her expression emptied of all softness, leaving only a chilling calm. Her eyes lifted to Derek, and for the first time, he stepped back, because her eyes, those dark, steady eyes, had changed. Cold, sharp, steel forged under pressure, predator, not prey. Amina stood perfectly still, bow-tied, shoulders set, eyes like tempered metal. The tremor in her hand was gone, replaced with clarity, a clarity that terrified anyone who understood what came next. And in that moment, before anyone could react, the real fight began. The long hallway stretched out like a tunnel, every sound amplified. The distant hum of lights, the muffled chatter behind closed doors, the echo of breathing that suddenly felt too loud. Amina stood at its center, still as stone, the bow at her collar perfectly tied, her eyes locked on Derek. A shift in the air rippled outward, something in her posture, her calmness, her readiness. It sent a quiet warning no one but Ruby seemed to understand. But Mason wasn't Ruby. He cracked his knuckles, scoffing at the tension. "Man, enough of this dramatic crap," he muttered, stepping forward. "I'll end it right now." "Mason, wait," Ruby tried, but he was already charging. It happened in a blur. He lunged at Amina with the brute confidence of someone who'd always relied on size over skill. His arms swung out, wide and reckless, aiming to grab, to shove, to dominate, but Amina did not retreat. At the very last second, when Mason was a breath away, she moved. A pivot, no wasted motion, no fear, a single, beautifully precise turn of her body. Her arm hooked around Mason's in a seamless arc, redirecting his momentum as if he weighed nothing. Her hip shifted, her stance rooted, and then, crack, a controlled takedown, not violent, not excessive, just perfect. Mason's back hit the floor with a thunderous echo that ricocheted down the hallway. The sound slammed into the walls, the ceiling, the lungs of every student watching. Ruby gasped. Kyle flinched so hard his phone slipped from his hand, clattering across the floor, camera still rolling. A few students screamed, more out of shock than fear, and Derek froze completely. His eyes widened, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Amina stepped back from Mason's sprawled form, her breathing even, her hands steady, her feet already sliding back into a stance that was unmistakably trained. Her movements had been effortless, flawless, controlled in a way that none of them had ever seen before. She hadn't attacked Mason out of anger, not out of panic, not out of spite. She had neutralized him with the precision of someone taught to do so in the most disciplined, unforgiving environment, someone who had practiced thousands of repetitions, someone whose instincts had been forged under pressure, not impulse. Mason groaned on the floor, stunned, not from pain, but from disbelief. Kyle backed up instinctively, his lips trembling. What was that? What the hell was that?" Amina didn't answer him. She didn't look shaken. She didn't even look triumphant. She simply raised her head, eyes cutting through the air toward Derek. Her voice, when it came, was soft, too soft. "I warned you," 3 words, barely above a whisper. Yet they hit harder than Mason's body hitting the floor. Students gathered rapidly, drawn by the commotion. A circle formed as more faces peered in, some horrified, some thrilled, all captivated. The hallway had become an arena. Kyle swallowed hard, scrambling to grab his phone, his hand shaking as he scooped it up. Derek, dude, maybe don't." But Derek had stopped listening. Humiliation, bruised ego, and sheer disbelief twisted together in his chest. His pride, his identity, had been challenged in front of everyone. He felt power slipping through his fingers like sand, and Derek Nolan did not tolerate losing power. He clenched his fists, jaw tightening until it hurt. "You think you can touch my guys and walk away?" he snarled, stepping forward. "You think you're special?" Amina didn't move. She didn't answer. Her calmness fanned the flames in Derek's chest. Students whispered, "She took Mason down. How did she even do that? She barely touched him." "She's not normal," but Derek only heard his own rage pounding in his skull. Amina stood poised, still, collected, more dangerous in her silence than any shout could have been. "I warned you," she repeated softly, eyes never leaving his. Instead of backing away, Derek charged forward, driven not by strategy, but by blind, reckless fury, and that was exactly when everything spiraled beyond his control. The fight drifted dangerously close to the stairwell, an area every student avoided when tensions rose. The wide landing above the steps felt too exposed, too precarious, too easy for a bad moment to turn into a deadly fall. Ruby knew it, Kyle knew it, but Derek didn't care. His pride was bleeding, and pride made him reckless. He lunged at Amina with a roar that echoed through the empty hall, his fist arcing straight toward her face. It was a wild punch, powerful, angry, but sloppy and desperate. Amina saw it coming long before it reached her. She shifted her weight, a single step, a tilt of her head. The punch whooshed past her cheek, close enough to stir a strand of her hair, but not close enough to touch her. Derek's momentum carried him forward, and his knuckles slammed into the wall with explosive force. Crack! A thin fracture splintered across the paint where his fist struck, an ugly reminder of how violently the blow had landed. Kyle's jaw dropped. Ruby gasped. Even the lingering students behind them froze. Derek staggered backward, shaking out his hand with a hiss of pain. His eyes were wild and unfocused, rage drowning out reason. Amina didn't attack. She didn't even raise her fists. Instead, she placed one calm hand on Derek's wrist and twisted. It wasn't brutal. It wasn't flashy. It was leverage, technique, discipline. She redirected his momentum effortlessly, her body moving like water around stone. In a smooth, controlled motion, she guided him backward until he stumbled. Once, twice, his heel hit the edge of the top stair. Ruby's scream pierced the air. "Kyle, do something!" But Kyle wasn't thinking about Derek. His phone was raised again, recording every second, like this was the climax of the most thrilling video he'd ever captured. For the briefest moment, Derek teetered, his body hanging over the threshold between balance and disaster. His arms flailed, his breath hitched, his eyes wide with sudden primal fear. "Derek!" Kyle shouted instantly. "Dude, watch out! You're gonna fall!" Amina reacted first. Her hand shot out, not to strike him, but to steady him. She released his locked wrist and grabbed his shirt instead, pulling him forward just enough to restore his balance. He didn't fall. He didn't tumble down the stairs. He didn't even scrape the edge, because she wouldn't let him. Amina's grip tightened, anchoring him firmly on the landing. It was the ultimate act of control, mercy, restraint. She could have let him fall. She could have let gravity end the fight for her. She could have let his own violence be his undoing, but she didn't. She saved him. Derek stared at her, panting, stunned, not by the near fall, but by the humiliation of being spared. For someone like Derek Nolan, mercy was worse than injury, worse than defeat, worse than anything he could have imagined. His face reddened with shame, anger, disbelief. "You," he choked out, "you think I needed your help?" Amina stepped back, releasing him. "You're safer on your feet," she said quietly. The words were too gentle, too calm, too cutting. Kyle lowered his phone for a second, as if even he sensed the shift. Ruby watched Amina with dawning understanding and a growing fear of what Derek might do next. And Derek trembled, not from fear, but from humiliation sharpened into something vicious. Being spared, being saved, in front of witnesses, ignited a fury in him far deeper than any wound. "You don't get to walk away," Derek roared, voice cracking with rage. He turned toward the hallway and screamed, "Mason! Kyle! Get over here! We're doing this together!" And with that command, swallowed by pride and blinded by anger, Derek dragged his friends into a battle none of them were ready for, one that would seal their fate. The intersection of two major hallways at Westview High was the loudest, busiest point of the school, a crossroads where hundreds of students moved between periods like a restless tide. But now that tide had stopped. Amina stood at the center of the wide space, framed by lockers and fluorescent lights, her bow neatly tied, her stance grounded. The crowd around her thickened with every passing second, students gathering, whispering, filming, sensing that something explosive was about to happen. Derek's shout cut through the chatter like a blade. "Mason! Kyle! Right now!" Mason pushed through the crowd, still sore from being thrown earlier, his ego bruised far deeper than his body. Kyle followed close behind, trembling but fueled by the chaos, and the dozens of viewers still watching his live stream. When the three boys surrounded Amina, the crowd sucked in a collective breath. "3 against 1?" someone whispered. "That's not a fight. That's a beating." But they didn't know Amina. Not yet. Derek made the first move, lunging with a furious left hook. Mason came from the right, aiming to grab her arms, while Kyle darted behind her to block any escape. For a moment it looked like sheer numbers might overwhelm her, but only for a moment. Amina stepped aside, Derek's punch slicing through empty air. Her hand shot up, redirecting Mason's grab with a swift parry. Kyle tried to come from behind, but she pivoted, letting his momentum pull him off balance. Her movements weren't frantic. They weren't panicked. They were clean. This was technique honed through discipline, not instinct. Derek swung again, angrier, sloppier. Amina ducked beneath his arm, grabbed his wrist, and twisted just enough to make him stagger, but not enough to break anything. Mason charged. Amina swept her foot behind his ankle, flipped him forward, and let him hit the ground with a dull thud that echoed through the hall. Kyle rushed her with both arms open, attempting a tackle. Amina sidestepped, hooked his elbow, and guided him straight into Derek. The two collided with a crash. Gasps erupted from the crowd. "What is happening?" someone whispered. "She's not even trying," another said. "She's trained." Derek stumbled to his feet again, rage twisting his features. He barreled toward her, shouting incoherently, fists swinging wildly. Amina blocked one punch with her forearm, then another, then struck his shoulder with a precise open-hand technique that forced him backward without leaving a mark. Kyle tried once more, but Amina caught his wrist mid-swing and pushed him aside like a curtain. It was one of the most controlled displays of martial skill the hallway had ever seen. Beautiful, terrifying, and effortless. And then, a freshman boy near the front of the crowd shouted, "Wait! Look at her wrist!" All eyes snapped to the thin band of ink visible when Amina's sleeve shifted, a black belt symbol intertwined with the insignia of the National Youth Karate Association. The crowd erupted. "No way, she's a black belt? That's the national emblem. She's a junior champion. That's why she moves like that." News spread through the corridors at lightning speed. Students leaned in. More phones rose. Awe replaced mockery. Fear replaced arrogance. Derek froze mid-step, but only for a heartbeat. Then his pride, already shredded to pieces, fueled him into a final, reckless fury. Amina stepped back into her stance, eyes steady, breathing controlled. The atmosphere charged. This was no longer a fight. It was a revelation. A voice from the crowd yelled loud enough to echo, "You messed with the wrong girl!" Amina didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge the praise. She only watched Derek with the calm of someone who had been forced into a role she never wanted, but knew exactly how to survive. But Derek, blinded by humiliation, still refused to stop. He clenched his fists, trembling with rage, and hurled himself at her again, unaware that every step he took pushed him deeper into the chaos he had unleashed. The confrontation spilled closer and closer to the administrative wing, where the hallways grew quieter and the air colder. Near the vice principal's office, a wall-mounted TV displayed school announcements on repeat. But today, something very different flickered across its screen. Kyle's live stream. The moment Amina flipped Mason, the second she redirected Derek. Every movement, clean, precise, unstoppable, broadcast to the hundreds of students following the group chat. Westview exposed. And one more viewer saw it. Vice Principal Parker. He was in his office, half asleep over paperwork, when the notification pinged. A teacher had forwarded the live stream with the message, "You need to see this, now." Parker clicked. His eyes widened. Chairs screeched as he leapt to his feet and sprinted out the door. But by the time he arrived at the scene, it was already over. The crowd parted reluctantly as he pushed through. Faces pale with shock, phones still raised, whispers ricocheting off the lockers. The carpeted hallway leading to the office was littered with fallen backpacks, scattered notebooks, and 3 groaning boys sprawled on the floor in various states of aching humiliation. Derek clutched his shoulder. Mason lay flat on his back, gasping. Kyle was curled forward, holding his elbow, and standing at the center of the chaos. Amina, breathing hard, chest rising and falling in slow, controlled waves, but still perfectly balanced. Her stance was relaxed now, not aggressive, just ready, prepared for anything. Ruby rushed to her side, gripping her arm protectively. "She didn't start this," Ruby insisted to the crowd. "You all saw it." Parker did not look at Ruby or the boys on the ground. His gaze zeroed in on Amina alone, as if she were the source of all wrongdoing. "What is going on here?" he demanded, voice shaking. The hallway fell silent. Students exchanged glances. Some pointed to the fallen bullies. Others pointed to Amina, but Ruby stepped forward again, breathless. "Sir, they attacked her first. There's a video. Kyle was live-streaming it. Everyone saw." But Parker didn't ask for the video. He didn't ask for witness accounts. He didn't ask who started it. Instead, he took in one look, just one, at Derek on the ground, then at Amina standing tall, and his face hardened with an immediate unfair conclusion. "Amina Harris," he said sharply, "violence like this is unacceptable. You used unnecessary force." Gasps erupted. "What? Did he even watch the video?" "That's not fair." She was defending herself. But Parker wasn't listening. His mind had already made sense of the narrative he preferred. Star athlete victimized. New girl overreacted. Open and shut case. Amina lifted her chin slightly. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. Her silence only made Parker more irritated. "Do you understand what you've done?" Parker snapped. "You could have seriously injured these boys." "They attacked her," a student yelled from the back. "Yeah, she saved herself. Check the live stream, Mr. Parker." "You're blaming the wrong person." The hallway exploded in protest. Parker's face reddened, not from reconsideration, but from embarrassment at being challenged so publicly. "Enough!" he barked, raising his voice above the chaos. "This is not up for debate." Amina remained calm, though her breathing slowed to something deeper, heavier. Ruby stood in front of her protectively, glaring at Parker. "If she hadn't defended herself," Ruby shouted, voice trembling with fury, "those three would have done something horrible." The crowd murmured in loud agreement, nodding, pointing at the fallen boys. But Parker ignored them all. He straightened his tie, tightened his jaw, and spoke with cold finality. "Amina Harris, you're coming with me, now." And as he marched her toward the office, the crowd's outrage followed like a rising storm, one that was about to expose far more than Parker expected. The vice principal's office felt smaller than usual, walls too close, air too thick, silence too heavy. The blinds were half closed, letting in narrow slices of gray light that cut across the room like prison bars. Amina sat in the chair opposite Parker's desk, her posture straight, her expression calm but edged with fatigue. Ruby hovered behind her, refusing to leave despite Parker's repeated ordering. A few minutes later, Derek limped in, cradling his arm dramatically. Kyle followed, avoiding Amina's gaze, his phone clutched tightly in his sweaty hand. Parker closed the door with a sharp click. "Now," he began, folding his arms, "I expect an explanation." "Derek?" Derek didn't hesitate for a moment. "She started it," he said, pointing at Amina with his uninjured hand. "She attacked us out of nowhere. I was just walking by and she freaked out." "That's a lie," Ruby snapped. Parker shot her a warning glare. "Ruby, you are not involved in this." "Yes, I am," she countered, stepping forward. "I saw everything." But Derek kept going, his voice dripping with fake innocence. "She grabbed me first, then she threw Mason, then she went after Kyle. We didn't even touch her." Amina didn't interrupt. Her silence was steady, unmoving. Kyle swallowed hard. Yeah, that's what happened. She just went crazy." "Show me the video," Parker demanded. Kyle froze. His thumb hovered over the screen where he had been desperately trying to delete the live stream recording before anyone could request it. But the internet is faster than guilt. Dozens of students had already screen recorded it. Ruby stepped forward. "You don't need his video," she said. "I recorded my own." Kyle's head snapped up. Derek stiffened. Even Amina blinked in surprise. Ruby pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, but not from fear, from fury. "This one starts earlier," she said, voice tight. "Before the part Kyle posted, before Mason attacked her, before Derek dragged her by the hair." Parker hesitated. The righteous certainty on his face faltered for the first time. "Play it," he said finally. Ruby unlocked her phone and tapped the file. The room filled with sound. Derek's voice, mocking, taunting, the shove that knocked Amina into the lockers, the hair pulling, the slur Mason whispered, the laughter, the fall of the blue bow. Kyle's encouragement. "Do it harder, man." Parker's jaw slackened. His eyes darted between the screen and Derek, who was rapidly losing color in his face. By the time the clip ended, the truth lay bare and ugly across the room. Nobody spoke. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Ruby lowered her phone slowly. "Now tell him she started it," she said, voice trembling with controlled rage. Derek opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Kyle stared at the floor, unable to lift his eyes. Amina exhaled once, quietly, as though a weight she hadn't acknowledged had finally shifted. Parker leaned back in his chair, stunned, the narrative he had built collapsing around him. Everything had flipped. Everything was different now, and there was no going back. But the fight wasn't over, not even close, because exposing the truth was only the beginning of the storm about to tear through Westview High. The temporary disciplinary hearing room looked more like a courtroom than anything else. A long wooden table dominated the center. Harsh white lights glared from overhead, flattening everyone's features and stripping the space of warmth. The air was cold, stiff, expectant. Amina sat quietly at one end, hands folded, expression unreadable. Across from her sat Vice Principal Parker, his jaw tight, his fingers clasped too tightly together. To Parker's left, Derek, pale and trembling, his arm still sore. Beside him, Mason, eyes lowered. Kyle, fidgeting non-stop, bounced his leg under the table. Ruby stood behind Amina, resolute. Two faculty members observed from the corner, clipboards in hand. The meeting began with practiced formality. "Let's review the incident," Parker announced, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. Ruby wasted no time. She stepped forward and placed her phone on the table. "I have additional footage," she said. "A different angle." Parker's expression tightened. "We've already seen one video. That doesn't mean—" "This one starts earlier," Ruby said sharply. A teacher nodded. "Let's view it." Sure. The room fell silent as the recording played. The shove into the lockers, the hair pulling, the slurs, the laughter, Kyle's voice. "Do it harder, man." They're all watching. Every second carved the truth deeper into the sterile room. When the video ended, no one moved. Parker cleared his throat. "Well, the angle is limited. We can't see everything," Ruby snapped. "You saw enough." But Derek, desperate, tried one last time. "She likes causing trouble," he muttered, voice cracking. "She started hitting us because we accidentally bumped into her." Kyle jumped in, eyes darting nervously. "Yeah, she threatened us first." "Stop lying," Ruby shot back, and then she produced the final blow, an audio recording she had saved. Kyle's unmistakable voice filled the room. "Come on, Derek, hit her harder so the whole group sees." The room went still. A teacher looked up sharply. "Kyle," she said, "is that your voice?" Kyle's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Mason slumped in his seat, unable to even look up. Derek swallowed hard, realizing the entire world he'd operated in, one built on fear and status, was collapsing. Something else broke in that moment, too, the illusion of Parker's authority. One teacher stood. "Mr. Parker, this incident, combined with previous complaints about your leniency toward athletes, suggests a conflict of interest. An investigation may be necessary," the other added carefully. Parker stiffened. His veneer of control cracked. "I've handled every case appropriately," he insisted, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Amina didn't speak. She didn't glare. She didn't even lift her chin. Her silence was louder than any accusation. Calm, steady, unshakable. It unsettled Parker more than shouting ever could, because in her quiet, he saw something he had avoided seeing for years. His own failure staring back at him. Amina's stillness, her unbroken composure, made Parker feel like he was the one being judged, like she was the mirror reflecting everything he had chosen not to fix. He could not escape it. By the end of the meeting, the faculty agreed. An emergency parent hearing would be held that very afternoon, and the storm that followed would be far bigger than anyone expected. The school auditorium buzzed with a tension that felt electric. Rows of metal chairs stretched across the room, filled with parents talking in sharp, anxious whispers. The air was thick, heavy, almost vibrating with the storm that was about to break. Vice Principal Parker stood at the front, adjusting the microphone with a stiff smile that fooled no one. Beside him sat members of the school board, stern-faced, tight-lipped, and clearly bracing themselves. The doors slammed open. Derek's parents entered first. His mother's face was tight with fury, his father marching forward like a man ready for battle. Derek wasn't with them. He'd been taken to the hospital for a minor shoulder injury, but his parents made sure everyone knew it. "That girl assaulted our son," his mother snapped, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "She should be expelled immediately." Behind them came the parents of Mason and Kyle, equally outraged, shaking their heads as though disgusted that their boys had been touched at all. Kyle's mother pointed harshly toward the front. "That girl is dangerous. She needs help or punishment. Maybe both." Parker cleared his throat, eager to regain control. "We understand the concern," he began, voice overly smooth, "and we must be cautious when interpreting recordings that may be inconclusive," but he didn't get to finish. The auditorium doors opened once more. Amina walked in beside her mother. Mrs. Harris carried herself with the posture of a woman who had spent years fighting battles far more serious than school politics. Her expression was calm but purposeful, measured strength behind every step. Students murmured. Some stood up just to get a better view. Parker gestured stiffly. "Mrs. Harris, thank you for coming. We're trying to determine the full context of—" "No," she interrupted, her voice firm, slicing the air cleanly. "You're trying to protect yourselves." A hush rippled across the room. She stepped forward, her hand resting gently on Amina's shoulder. "My daughter has never attacked anyone in her life. Not once. But she knows how to defend herself. I made sure of that when we moved here," Kyle's mother scoffed. "Exactly the problem. She's trained. She's violent." Mrs. Harris's eyes sharpened. "Violent?" she repeated softly. "Or prepared." Parker raised his palms, sweating. "Perhaps we should not jump to conclusions." But Mrs. Harris wasn't done. "If this school cannot protect its students from harassment, bullying, racial slurs, and physical assault," she said, voice rising just enough to fill the room, "then you leave children like my daughter no choice but to protect themselves. And if any adult in this building thinks her defending her own safety is grounds for punishment, then I will protect her, with the law behind me." A collective gasp rippled through the parents. Then, from the back row, a man stood. "My son was bullied by Derek last year," he said. Another parent rose. "And mine. He reported it, but nothing happened." A third stood up, shaking with anger. "Mr. Parker dismissed our complaint because Derek was an important athlete." There was no stopping the momentum now. Voices erupted from every corner, parents calling out, accusing, demanding explanations. Students chimed in, some sharing their own experiences, others pointing out moments they witnessed. Parker shrank behind the podium, the weight of years of buried complaints crashing down around him. He was surrounded by parents demanding answers, by board members glaring, by students exposing truths he had ignored. Ruby stepped beside Amina, whispering, "They finally see it." And with pressure mounting like a tidal wave, the administration ordered Amina and Ruby to a private meeting, ready to hear the full truth for the first time. The counseling office at Westview High was normally a haven. Soft colors, plush chairs, posters about mental health and safe spaces. But today, the room felt tight, overheated, and stretched thin with tension. Amina sat in one of the chairs, her posture upright, hands resting calmly in her lap. Ruby sat beside her, fidgeting but determined. Across from them were the school counselor, the principal, and two empty chairs reserved for Derek's friends. Mason and Kyle entered moments later, shoulders hunched, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The counselor folded her hands. "We're here to hear the truth. All of it. No interruptions, no excuses." She nodded at Ruby first. Ruby inhaled shakily, then spoke, clear, steady, precise, walking the room through every detail from the hallway encounter to the live stream, painting the truth with unflinching accuracy. Her voice trembled at times, but her conviction never faltered. When she finished, the room fell silent. The counselor then turned to Amina. "Amina, what do you want to say?" Amina lifted her eyes, calm, steady, with a quiet strength that felt heavier than shouting. "I didn't strike them," she said softly. "I only reacted to stop them." Her words were simple, but each one landed like a blade, clean, sharp, irrefutable. Kyle swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "Derek, he told me to record everything. He said if I didn't, he'd make sure the whole school turned on me." He pressed his palms to his face. "I never wanted it to go that far. I didn't know how to say no." Mason, who had been silent until now, suddenly broke. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he clutched the edge of his chair. "It was Derek," he sobbed. "He planned it. He said we had to teach her a lesson for ignoring him. I didn't want to. He said he'd jump me if I didn't help." The room stilled. Even the principal, who had remained stoic throughout, shifted uncomfortably. The counselor wrote quickly, her expression tightening with every word. Then a sharp digital ping filled the space. The counselor glanced at her laptop. "Derek will join us via video call." The screen lit up. Derek appeared, sitting upright in a hospital bed, arm in a sling, face twisted with panic and fury. He started shouting before the call fully connected. "Don't listen to them. They're lying. They're just trying to screw me over. Ruby hates me. Mason's weak. Kyle's pathetic. Derek," the principal said sharply, "calm down. We need your statement." "My statement?" he snarled. "My statement is that none of this is my fault. They betrayed me, all of them." Suddenly, another figure appeared on screen. A woman, Derek's mother. Her hand shot out and snatched the phone from him, her eyes blazing with something far stronger than Derek's rage. "Enough," she said. Derek froze. "You will not lie to these people again," she said, voice low and trembling, not with fear, but with disappointment. "You have hurt others. You have humiliated others. And now you will face the consequences. No one is saving you from this, not even me." The room went silent again, but this time with something raw and final. No one expected the death blow to Derek's lies to come from his own mother. Derek's face crumpled, his confidence collapsing like a structure built on sand. Amina watched quietly, expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, she spoke a full sentence with unshaken clarity. "I don't need anyone to defend me," she said. "I just want justice." Her voice hung in the air, steady, powerful, impossible to dismiss. The principal exhaled slowly, then stood. "Tomorrow," he said, "we convene a formal disciplinary hearing, the final one, and the fate of everyone involved would be decided." The large council chamber had never been this full. Rows of chairs stretched from wall to wall, packed with parents, teachers, staff, and students. A long panel table stood at the front, with microphones arranged neatly. A projection screen glowed white behind it, waiting. The room buzzed with an uneasy mix of anger, curiosity, and dread. Amina entered quietly with Ruby at her side. She walked without haste, her expression calm, steady, almost serene. Parents whispered as she passed, some with sympathy, some with guilt for having judged her too soon. Ruby stayed close, protective and proud. Derek arrived next, guided by his mother. His posture was stiff, his confidence shattered, eyes darting nervously around the room. Kyle and Mason followed behind him, shoulders hunched, faces pale. Vice Principal Parker was already seated at the panel, looking as if the ground beneath him might crumble at any moment. The principal tapped the microphone. "We are here today to review the incident involving Amina Harris and the students Derek Nolan, Kyle Benson, and Mason Reed. After several testimonies and additional materials provided, we will now view the restored footage." A hush fell over the chamber. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life, the original live stream. But complete this time, the entire truth played out in painful clarity. Derek cornering Amina, Mason shoving her, the slurs, the hair pulling, the bow hitting the floor, Kyle snickering behind the camera, Parker walking past earlier, ignoring the hallway confrontation. Everything that had been denied, twisted, or buried now lit the room with brutal honesty. Gasps rippled through the audience. A mother covered her mouth. A teacher flinched. Students shifted, guilt-ridden in their seats. When the video ended, the silence was suffocating. Then came the real explosion. A teacher in the front row stood with a stack of papers. "I can no longer stay quiet," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "There have been several previous bullying complaints involving Derek Nolan. Every one of them was dismissed by Mr. Parker." Murmurs of shock spread across the room. She continued, lifting an email printout. "This is Parker's response to a parent who reported Derek for assaulting their son. We cannot jeopardize the team's success over minor misunderstandings." The chamber erupted. Parents shouted. Teachers glared. Students whispered in outrage. The school board members exchanged horrified looks. Parker's face drained of color. He stammered, This is taken out of context." But another teacher stood. Then another. Emails, witnesses, past complaints, hidden under years of favoritism, were spilled into the open like evidence in a courtroom. "You've protected athletes at the expense of victims. You ignored violence. You enabled this." The room erupted louder than before, a tidal wave of anger and betrayal crashing over the man who once sat comfortably in authority. The principal raised a hand, voice firm. "Vice Principal Parker, you are officially suspended pending a full investigation." The gavel-like sound of the microphone shutting off seemed to seal Parker's fate. He sank back in his seat, defeated, breathing heavily as the weight of years of cover-ups finally collapsed around him. Amina watched from her place in the crowd. Not triumphant, not smiling, simply still. Her hands rested at her sides, relaxed for the first time, as though she had finally set down a burden she had carried alone. And now, with Parker removed and the truth laid bare, the room turned toward the panel, waiting for the final verdict on Derek, Kyle, and Mason. Late afternoon sunlight draped the school courtyard in soft gold. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the low hum of anxious whispers. Students gathered in clusters, leaning against railings, sitting on benches, pacing back and forth, waiting for the disciplinary council to announce the final verdict. Amina stood with Ruby beneath the shade of an old oak tree. She looked calm, but her stillness held a weight Ruby could feel. The past few days had reshaped the entire school, and Amina was at the center of it all, whether she wanted to be or not. At last, the doors to the administrative building opened. Silence rippled across the courtyard. The principal stepped out with several board members behind him. He unfolded a sheet of paper, cleared his throat, and read aloud. Voice steady, deliberate, final. "After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, the council has reached a unanimous decision." Students inched closer. Ruby held her breath. "For Derek Nolan, indefinite suspension and mandatory psychological intervention." A collective gasp washed through the courtyard. Derek's parents stiffened. Derek himself was escorted out moments later, avoiding Amina's gaze as he walked past her. His shoulders curled inward, stripped of the arrogance and cruelty that once defined him. For Kyle Benson, severe disciplinary warning and 3 months of community service. Kyle shut his eyes tightly, swallowing the reality of consequences he had never imagined facing. For Mason Reed, behavioral monitoring and enrollment in an anti-violence program. Mason nodded silently, almost relieved. Part of him had wanted this reckoning all along. And for Vice Principal Parker, immediate suspension pending a full investigation into prior misconduct. Teachers exchanged glances. Students murmured. Parents stared wide-eyed. In one announcement, years of buried injustice had finally cracked open. The principal continued, "As for Amina Harris," every head turned. "She is found completely innocent of wrongdoing. Her actions were in self-defense." Ruby exhaled shakily, a smile breaking across her face. Amina, however, did not react outwardly. She simply closed her eyes, as if letting the verdict settle quietly inside her chest. The crowd parted as Derek was escorted across the courtyard. He kept his eyes glued to the ground, refusing to meet Amina's. The shame was too much. The truth had stripped him of everything he believed made him untouchable. When he passed her, Amina didn't move. She didn't gloat. She didn't glare. Her stillness was enough. Ruby slipped an arm around her shoulders. "You did it," she whispered. "You changed this whole school." Amina shook her head softly. "No, I just refused to break." Ruby squeezed her hand. Final revelation. One by one, students began approaching. A boy with a fading bruise on his jaw. A girl who once transferred homerooms because of Derek's harassment. 2 freshmen who had been shoved into lockers more times than they could count. "Thank you, Amina. You stood up for all of us. You showed them we deserved to be safe." Amina listened, stunned. She had never sought attention, never asked to be a symbol of anything. But here they were, kids who had suffered in silence, finally finding their voices because she found hers. She had unintentionally become a beacon of courage, a reminder that strength doesn't come from violence, but from refusing to be diminished. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Amina stepped forward, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted, and for the first time since arriving at Westview High, she smiled. Not a forced smile, not a polite one, a real, quiet, victorious smile. Because now she knew the fight she survived today wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been silenced, and the school would never be the same again. And that's how one quiet black girl shattered the power structure of an entire school, without cruelty, without revenge, just undeniable strength and discipline. The bullies who tried to break her ended up exposing themselves, and Amina walked away not as a victim, but as the girl who rewrote the rules for everyone who'd ever been silenced. Now I want to hear from you. What part of this story shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be seen.